Hi, sorry for the slight delay in starting. Um, if you're in, can you let me know that you can hear me in the chat? That would be great. We've just had a couple of little technical issues behind the scenes, so um, we'll just be waiting for Joe and Brooke from Renovation Plan to be joining us in a second. But hello, hi Louise, hi Lydia, that's great. So, oh, hello everybody. It's great to all have you here. We today we're talking about a really important topic, which is insurance, which isn't the most spangly topic, but it is really important and it's quite complicated. And if you get it wrong on your home renovation, then obviously you can open yourself up to lots of problems. So we're really happy today to have Renovation Plan, who are home renovation and self-build specialist insurers. So they deal with, particularly with this type of insurers, and especially with home renovators and their needs. So we're really happy to have them with us today. We hopefully are going to have Joe and Brooke coming. Yes, hello, Brooke.
Okay now.
So great, we can hear you, we can see you. And is Joe going to join on his side as
Yeah,
well?
he should just be joining now. I'm so sorry about that.
Right,
Typical
we got there in
IT.
the end, everyone.
No, it's fine. It's kind of meeting of tech systems, isn't it? It doesn't always go to
Oh,
plan.
got to love technology.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today, Brooke and Joe. Just a bit of admin. I will be in the chat. I will, if you have any questions as we go through, I could be marking them up, and we're going to get to questions at the end. So I'll be here to deal with that. And I can hand over to you, Joe and Brooke. Do you want to just introduce yourselves and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll get the presentation in front of everyone first. Right. Okay, yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Yeah, so before we start, just a quick thank you to HomeNotes for giving us the platform to speak to you about renovation insurance, and yeah, how Renovation Plan can help to protect your projects from start to finish. So yeah, introductions. My name's Joe. I'm Renovation Plan's broker development executive. So my main role within the team is basically to look after the various brokers that use our products. So that usually entails me giving them, training and essentially being their insurance agony aunt, I suppose. So I started my career off at Renovation Plan almost 10 years ago, and still going strong. So Brooke, I mean, if you wanted to give everyone a quick introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Brooke. I am the manager of the Renovation Plan team. I've been here 10 years now as well, same as Joe, primarily with a background in property insurance. I can safely say that I understand firsthand the stresses of doing a renovation project because I've literally just completed my own one. So I completely relate to everything that any of you guys might be feeling right now if you are starting a project or you're midway through. And this is why we're here to guide and support you throughout your project, because there's quite a few of us within the team who have all been there firsthand.
Thanks.
Brilliant. So yeah, I suppose welcome to the presentation or our presentation. What is renovation insurance? So our main aim for today, it's really to give you all a better understanding as to what renovation insurance is, why you need it whilst you're doing work to your property. And yeah, how it can really come in handy should there ever be an incident that you need to make a claim for. So, as well as this, we will then go through the common, misconceptions, the project types that we cover, the protection that we offer, and basically the implications of not having the right cover in place. So, we're also, I think was mentioned, we're going to hold, like a Q&A at the end to answer any questions that you might have. But obviously, feel free to put any questions in the chat box during the presentation. We'll be more than happy to answer these as we go. So if there's anything that obviously comes straight to mind, then yeah, feel free to put those in.
Okay, so who are we at Renovation Plan? We are specialists in renovation and self-build insurance for any type of project that you might be doing. We work with a variety of different clients, so as well as direct customers like you and I, we also work with property developers and brokers and introducers as well who recommend their own clients to us. So these can be companies like architects, structural engineers, anybody really that might have a client who's doing a project, we link in with them, and they try and educate their clients as well, because there is a distinct lack of education in the market about what renovation insurance actually is. A key benefit of what our team does is renovation and self build is all that we do. So we're specialists in this area, meaning when you do get a quote with us or you need to change your policy mid-term, you've got a knowledgeable team there on hand to help you with your insurance requirements. We've been doing this for, I think renovation's been running for over 15 years now, and our product is underwritten by AXA, who I'm sure you've all heard of before. So you've got the backing there of a really strong insurer.
Right. So what is our aim? I mean, we've already talked about what the aim is in terms of this presentation, but like our aim as a business, well, basically to put it simply, we strongly believe that, no one who's doing work to their property should be left exposed due to not having arranged the right insurance. So before you start your project, arranging renovation insurance should be one of the top things, or the first things on your to-do list. So it's so important to get right. And if you don't arrange the right cover, the consequences can be disastrous. So the main thing you really need to ask yourself is what should happen? Should I suffer a loss and I haven't arranged the right insurance? I mean, one of the prime examples I always give to, clients and brokers that I deal with is, let's say, for instance, you're doing an extension to your own home. You could be three-quarters of the way through. You maybe at this point have spent up to £180,000 on the work, depending on how big that extension is or how much, how many materials you bought in, that sort of thing. And three-quarters of the way through, let's say for instance there's a large fire. That fire could ultimately wipe out or cause a massive amount of damage to the property that was there, the extension that was being built, and the materials. And if you haven't got the right cover in place, have you got enough to rebuild the property that was there, and have you got enough to replace the work that you've already spent the money on? So it's one of those. If you spent all that money, do you really want to be in a position where you've then got to fund it again? And I'm going to assume the answer is going to be no. So it's very important that you've obviously got the right cover in place. Unfortunately, it's uncommon that people actually know what cover they need to arrange when they're doing work to a property. And if I'm being completely honest, if I wasn't working in insurance, I probably wouldn't know and would maybe rely on the existing buildings insurance or home insurance. But you've got to be very careful and read the conditions, read the restrictions, the exclusions that apply to these type of policies, because when you are doing work, they can essentially make your policy like null and void. So the whole purpose of our sort of our main aim is to basically educate and make sure people know what to look out for, what cover to arrange. So then if something goes wrong, then, they've got the right cover in place.
So, what does renovation insurance actually cover? A renovation policy is designed to replace your existing buildings insurance that you might already have on your property. So, if you've got a home insurance or you've got an unoccupied policy or a landlord's insurance on your building and you're doing work to it, there is no need to keep that in place at the same time as having a renovation policy. The only time that we might suggest keeping a separate policy elsewhere is if you need cover for more comprehensive contents insurance. So as an example, if you're living in the property throughout the work and you've still got your electrical items in there, such as TVs, laptops, things like that, you've got any art or valuable items, then a renovation policy, it's not really designed to cover those items. Our main aim is your building that's there and all the works that's going on. So in that scenario, we might suggest that you keep your contents insured with your current provider and you just remove the buildings cover from that policy, and you can use that return premium from your current insurer to sort of pay towards the renovation plan premium. A renovation insurance policy, it will cover you for all of your usual insurance perils that you're probably familiar with from your history of insurance. So things like fire, flood, subsidence, anything like that. But we're also insuring all of the new work that you're carrying out on that property and all of the materials that you're using to do that work against all of those perils that you might already be familiar with. We have three different levels of cover available. So the reason we do this is so that we've got a super flexible policy to meet your individual requirements. So we've got a really basic policy, which, being completely honest, we don't really recommend unless you've got a really derelict structure there that you're only really concerned about sort of fire and public liability cover. We've then got a mid-range one, which is kind of similar to a standard home insurance policy. And then we've got an all risks policy, which is our Premier Plus level of cover. And that's what we tend to recommend for everybody, just to make sure you've got a fully comprehensive policy in place. A little bit later on in the presentation, we run through why you do need renovation cover and why relying on your home insurance or your contractor's policy could potentially be leaving you exposed, because we know that that's the two things that clients always say to us, that they're adamant they're insured under their home insurance or their contractor's policy.
Right. So yeah, what type of projects can we cover and what type of properties? So I mean, you name it, we will probably do most things. There's not generally something we'll decline unless there's, a really, there's a big reason why. But yeah, like I say, we'll take on most things. So looking at the list here, obviously there's a bit of a selection here. So we've got residential and commercial property. So look, residential, you're doing work your own home or holiday home, whatever it might be, somewhere that you're going to be living or occupying. We can do internal refits, we can do extensions, loft conversions, basement extensions, that sort of thing. Commercial properties as well, so not just the residential. If you were buying, say, a property where there was a shop on the ground floor, flat above, or if it was fully commercial, or you had a big office block that you were doing a refit to with the intention to let out to obviously tenants, things like that. And then, new builds and self builds. So new build, if you were getting someone to build you a property from scratch, and wanted to arrange sort of works cover yourself and materials that you were bringing in or liabilities for the land, that sort of thing. And then self build. So if you've got experience doing the work yourself and want to build your own property, then fine, we've got no issue with that. So, we do a lot of those recently. I think they're becoming more and more common, as well as the conversions. So we are now seeing a lot of sort of churches, pubs, barns, you name it, whatever commercial property being converted into residential. We pick up a lot of those. And yeah, I've already touched on the basement excavations, but yeah, if you've got a project that's involving major works, piling, underpinning, that sort of thing, you might want to consider having your own policy in place or a separate policy in place, because it all goes back to sort of like, can you rely on your home insurance? Can you rely on the unoccupied buildings insurance? When you're doing stuff like that, I would say most certainly not, just because of the, how extensive that work is. So those are sort of things to consider. And then another sort of really popular one at the moment, listed buildings. We're seeing them time and time again, and especially with listed buildings, as I'm sure a lot of you know, with the regulations, the rules, and the things that sort of apply when you're doing works to these buildings and all the hoops you have to jump through. One of the most important things to consider is the insurance, is the protection, because if something goes wrong, you have to sort of make sure you have to get it back into the position it was prior, because obviously, you having to use certain materials, that sort of thing. Have you got a policy that can meet those needs? So that's something we do as well.
So we then come on to why should you not rely on your home insurance policy if that's what you've got in place at the moment. So a home insurance policy will generally allow you to do works up to a certain value. Normally it's about 20 to 25,000. Some sort of more comprehensive home insurers will allow you to do up to about 75. But the key thing to point out here is that all this means is that your home insurance isn't invalidated by the works that you're carrying out. It doesn't actually mean that your work is insured. So we're talking about your materials that you're purchasing to do the work, your unfixed fixtures and fittings, anything like that wouldn't effectively be insured if you remained on your home insurance policy. So if you've got a new kitchen or a bathroom waiting to be installed, you could have spent 30 grand on a kitchen, another 10,000 on your bathroom, and they're all being stored in your garage waiting for your contractors to come around and fit them. They wouldn't fall under your home insurance policy until they're fitted to the building and they actually form part of your buildings. And they wouldn't fall under your contents because they're not a standard contents item. So you've potentially got quite a large gap there. It's also important to point out as well that your builder wouldn't insure any items that you've purchased yourself, because they don't have any financial interest in those items. It's not in their interest to insure them. If your home also needs to be rebuilt during the period of work, so even if the loss that occurs isn't as a result of your building work, sometimes a home or an unoccupied policy can be completely invalidated if you're carrying out works at your property. What that means is if there is a loss at your property, regardless of if it's anything to do with the work, could be completely unrelated, and it might have happened even if your house wasn't being renovated. Um, because the policy can be invalidated by structural works going on at that property, the chances are the insurer won't look to pay out that claim and they are likely to cancel your policy. This could leave you with a huge exposure, a huge cost that you might have to fund yourself. In the unfortunate event, which touch wood wouldn't happen to anybody, but in the unfortunate event of a completely catastrophic loss, like a total loss, you could then end up being responsible for the entire rebuilding cost of your property. So not to scare you all, but it's worth pointing out just because a lot of people don't really realise this and they do try and rely on their home insurance. Over the next couple of slides, we've got some real claim examples of clients that have actually been left exposed as a result of either relying on their home insurance or they've been relying on their contractor's policy during their work.
Right, yes. So this first example actually came up by a conversation we was having with the client at quote stage, and this is kind of where it came up. They realised that they didn't have the right policy in place. So this is where then we stepped in and basically helped them to arrange it. But unfortunately, this was then following a loss. So basically, the gist of this one is they relied on their home insurance. So the client had a £400,000 project, so essentially spending £400,000 on this project. They were doing, full internal refits. They were building a new extension. They'd bought these new kitchen and bathroom units, which they were then storing in an outbuilding, waiting for them to obviously get to the point where they could install them. Then a large escape of water happened and it damaged the new kitchen that they put in, the bathroom, and basically extensive water damage all throughout the building. So this claim actually came to £120,000. And unfortunately, because they'd relied on the home insurance policy and it had an exclusion in there that basically stated that, any property undergoing works, we're not covering the damage, essentially making that policy, like I say, null and void, it wouldn't pay out that claim. So unfortunately for that client, they then chose to go through the stage again, get some lending to be able to complete that project. But obviously, had they had the right cover in place, they wouldn't need to go through those steps, go through that sort of, that absolute agony of having to, you know, get rid of all the damage and, reassess and start again. So if they had our policy in place, we would have covered that. But also, if they had damage to the materials, the fixtures, the fittings that were stored in that outbuilding prior to that sort of being fitted, then we'd also cover those as well. So as well as sort of cover to the main building, it's also again cover to the work that you need to consider. And yeah, just a stat down there, 80%, 86% of people assume that their home insurance will cover them during a renovation project. And, don't make that mistake. Like I said earlier, always make sure you're reading your existing policy documents, checking what exclusions, what restrictions are applying. And, 9 times out of 10, there will be these work exclusions. There will be these exclusions in respect of, new fixtures, new fittings. So just always double check.
We then come on to a claim example of a client who relied on their contractor's insurance policy. So we do speak to so many clients who are completely adamant that their contractor is insuring their project and their materials when they're carrying out works at their property, especially if the contractor has mentioned they've got a fully comprehensive all risks insurance, which is usually a really comprehensive policy for the contractor themselves, but that isn't comprehensive enough for you as an individual. So on this example that you can see on the screen, we've got a client who purchased their own kitchen, bathroom, and materials for about 65,000. They was all being stored on site, waiting for the contractor to come and install them, bit similar to what we mentioned earlier. There was a fire at the property, and all of these items were destroyed, and there was also some damage to the building as well. The client tried to claim on their contractor's policy because they was under the impression because there's works going on and they've got one main contractor, he was responsible for ensuring it all. However, as we mentioned earlier, the contractor has no financial interest in any items that are purchased directly by you. So all of those items that were damaged weren't insured under his policy, and he's not insuring the existing structure of your home. So again, his policy wouldn't look to pay out any damage to your building. Had the client have taken out a renovation policy before they started their work, then it would have been something that could have been looked at under a renovation insurance policy, providing there was no random exclusions in there.
I also just wanted to touch on the contractors policy again, as this has come up quite a lot in what I sort of do recently when speaking to brokers, is with a contractors policy, they're not project specific. So whereas our policy will be focusing solely on this, theirs will be for other projects throughout the year that they do. So ours will be focused solely on damage to the structure, damage to the work for this project, but also with a contractors policy, they don't necessarily have to tell you that they've not renewed it. So they might have not renewed it, and then should a claim occur and it would have fell on their policy, it might not necessarily get picked up. So that's also something to consider: is has your contract always got the right cover in place? You'll always have to keep on top of them. But if you arrange the work yourself, then you don't necessarily need to worry about that. But yes, 3 important steps for you guys to consider. So, research and hiring professionals. I think it goes without saying that before you start any work, you should make sure you're hiring the right people. So what we mean by that is, people that have the experience in doing the work that you're hiring them to do. So basically, don't be employing a jack of all trades to create a new basement for you if they have none or very little experience. I think that's a bit of an extreme example, and no one here would do that. But it's just to, obviously, whatever work you're doing, make sure you check with them that they know what they're doing and they've got experience doing it. Another thing you can do is, even if you just do a bit of like internet Google search, bit of research on the company, check if it flags any sort of any red flags come up. So any sort of news articles that you know they're in there for being like a cowboy builder or something, unless they're doing sort of like charity work, then that's all right. But anything that draws any red flags, you can probably find on the internet. And yeah, also, and this is quite important, also request a copy of their insurance document so you can see what protection they already have in place. So we would expect them at the very least to have public liability protection in place, so that if they were negligent for causing damage to any or injury to any third party, which would then include you, have they got adequate levels of protection in place? So they should have that as a very minimum, but they should also maybe have things like contractors or risks, which is essentially cover for the works, like their own works cover. So don't ever feel awkward or bad that you're asking for these documents, because you're well within your rights. And your contractor, provided they're a decent outfit, they should be able to provide those fairly quickly. Another thing, have a clear plan and scope of work with expected timeframes. So the reason why we say this is, 9 times out of 10, most projects will overrun, but sometimes that can be down to poor planning. Now, we understand that obviously things do happen, there's other costs involved, but if you can plan as much as possible, have a valid scope in place, it prevents any delays and additional costs, which will, it can then reduce the need for you having to extend your existing policies or having to amend them, which will obviously, can cost you more money in the long run. So obviously trying to save you as much money as possible, just, have a clear plan and, make sure it's going smoothly. Another thing, protecting your investment. So obviously we touched on the insurance, and that is very important because obviously you don't want to be leaving yourself exposed. I know that, we appreciate that projects, they can cost a lot of money, and you want to try and save money where you can, but never cut corners with the protection. The last thing you want is to have spent all this time, this money, this effort on building what can be your dream home in some scenarios, and then something happens, and then God forbid, you have to rebuild it, you have to repair it. But what if you don't then have the right cover and you don't have the spare funds to be able to rectify that damage? You've just going back to square one, and we wouldn't want anyone to be in that position. So obviously insurance is a massive thing, and making sure you're hiring the right people, just touching on that again. Protection should be one of the first things you even consider, so just make sure you got that in place.
So we've got a few more considerations here alongside our solutions for each of these. We just wanted to highlight all of these to you because they're things that our clients are not normally aware of. So Joe briefly touched on this just now, but 87% of projects overrun. This is really important to think about when you're arranging your insurance policy, just because we always recommend taking out a slightly longer policy based on that statistic, because of the amount of policies that do projects that do overrun. It's also more cost effective to take out a slightly longer policy than it is to keep extending. So although we can offer extensions a minimum of 1 month at a time, you do pay a £25 admin fee each time you extend with our policy. So if you'd have just taken out a slightly longer policy in the first place, you're going to save those admin fees each time. Another benefit of our policy as well is that if you do take out that slightly longer policy and then your works do finish on time and early, you are entitled to a full pro rata return premium, subject to no claims and a cancellation fee. So you'll get that proportion of the policy back that you've paid for, subject to no claims. And then coming on to budgets. So unfortunately, 92% of projects go over budget. So we all have a cost in our mind that we want to aim for. And being realistic, we all go over budget. We get halfway through the project, we start adding things on and thinking, oh, whilst we've got the builders there, we might as well get them to do X, Y, and Z as well. So it's really important to ensure when arranging your insurance that you are choosing the correct sum insured. The reason this is really important, other than the obvious, is because if there was a total loss halfway through your project, you want to be insured for that full amount so that your claim is paid in full. There's something called the average clause, which applies to our policy and is quite common in home insurance policies as well. And what this means is if you are underinsured in the event of any loss, not just a total loss, your claim figure could be reduced by the percentage of underinsurance. So you're always better to overdo your sums insured a little bit, just to give you a bit of contingency on there, and keep us updated throughout your project if it's looking like that cost is going to increase, so that we can make sure you are insured on the right basis. Another thing to bear in mind as well, which your contractor will make super clear when you're in the negotiation stage with them, is they might need to be named on your policy as joint insured. This is normally to comply with a JCT contract or a REBA contract, and it's nothing to worry about. It's not scary. We can do that for you on our Premier Plus level of cover. So again, just let us know when you're speaking to us, and we can get them added on. Also, to bear in mind, if you've signed a party wall agreement with your neighbour, this means that you're liable for structural damage to their property when it's found to be as a result of your building work. If you have signed a party wall agreement, again, it's not a problem, but you do want to consider cover for what's called non-negligence. We're not going to go in the ins and outs of non-negligence cover because it's a little bit more of a complex area. But if you have signed a party wall agreement, again, just let us know. And then one of the team, when they're taking your details and looking at a quote for you, they can fully run through all of that with you and things to consider.
Right. So yeah, policy conditions. I mean, these are, every policy out there will have these policy conditions. The ones that we've listed here, we would say are the most important and the ones that you're probably going to find with most renovation policies. So to start with, you've got a works must start within 30 or 60 days. Now, can't speak for everyone, but with us, it's 30 or 60 days, depending on the level of cover that you opt for. And what we're trying to basically say is that some form of work must start within 30 or 60 days of the policy starting. So that can be as little as site prep or strip out work, that sort of thing. The reason why insurers tend to have this condition in there is just to basically what they don't want is to be covering properties that let's say, for example, someone's bought an unoccupied property, it's pending planning permission, and works aren't going to be starting for like 6 months, for example, maybe, because there's policies out there that can cover unoccupied properties even whilst they're pending work. So yeah, like I say, we can cover properties provided some element of work is starting, and it can just be as little as strip out. Then you've got the cessation of works clause. So again, it's quite similar to the works must start clause. We just don't want to be at any stage covering a property where there's no works for long period of times. So that clause basically says that works, there can't be a gap of say more than 30 or 60 days, obviously, again, depending on what level of coverage you've gone for. But again, it can be if you say you are doing one chunk of work first, and then there's going to be a little gap before you start the rest. Even if you're doing preparation for the remaining work, that's fine. But there's just things you need to consider as well. Don't be, long periods of time without any work, because there are other policies out there that can cater for those periods at that point. All right. And then I think everyone's probably aware of this, but planning permissions, consent, and regulations, there's usually conditions written into every sort of works policy that you don't do any work that requires either planning permission, consent, or regulation, and you haven't got it. So just make sure that you've got all those permissions before you start any work, because it can, depending on what the loss is and how severe it is, it can actually impact any sort of claim settlements, and insurers in some like worst case scenarios can even throw out a claim. And then unoccupied properties. So like most policies, there's conditions that apply to unoccupied properties. So with us, if there's a property that's going to be unoccupied for a period of more than 14 days, you just need to ensure then at least once every 7 days it's inspected by someone. We say an approved person, so that doesn't necessarily need to be you if you've gone on holiday. As long as it's friend, neighbour, family, it could be even the contractor, someone that you've approved to do that for you. As long as they're expecting it and making sure then that there's nothing gone wrong. The main sort of things they're looking out for is if there's like an escape of water and it doesn't get picked up for like a week, 2 weeks, something like that. They want to avoid those situations where the loss can obviously be made worse. Security must be maintained. So if you've told insurers that there's an alarm and there isn't an alarm set when the property is unoccupied, then that's a problem. So just make sure whatever security features you've said they are in place when the property is unoccupied. And then water switched off at the mains or heater maintained at 15 degrees to prevent sort of pipes freezing. And then gas and or electric turned off unless used for security. So if your alarm needs the electric, then they'll allow that to be on.
We then come on to the optional extras that we've got available. So again, we're not going to go into these in huge detail because not everybody needs them, but it is good to make you aware that you can add these items on if you need them. We mentioned contents earlier, so we can add contents on, but it would be for really basic items only, such as white goods and furniture. We can also add on hand tools and own plant if you've purchased any items where you're doing some of the work yourself. And hired in plant as well. If you'd prefer to hire any items in, that's not a problem. It's usually more cost effective to actually insure it through us than it is through the hire company. So I think normally hire companies do really try and sell their own insurance, but it's always worth getting a quote from them and then getting a quote for us to add that on just in case we are more competitive for you. Caravans and site huts. So we get a lot of clients come to us who are living in a caravan on site whilst they're doing their work. That's not a problem. We can ensure that, providing it's kept on the site that we're insuring. Non-negligence, we mentioned earlier. Advanced loss of rent, we can add this on if you're renovating your property to rent out, and you've already got a tenancy agreement signed and lined up when the works are finished, then we can add advanced loss of rent cover on. Increased public liability. So we include 2 million of public liability as standard on all of our policies, but you do have the option to increase that to 5 if you need it. And the same with terrorism as well. This is only really more of a concern for if you've got a property in a city in the UK. However, we're coming across quite a lot of lenders at the moment who require people to add terrorism on, even if they've got a really country property where it's extremely unlikely something's going to happen. But sometimes lenders are making it a requirement, so we can add that on for you alongside the 5 million of PL, which lenders seem a little bit obsessed with at the moment as well. Okay, and then just coming on to our new collaboration with HomeNotes. So we are a new partner with HomeNotes, and as you're all aware, they've got some really good content to help guide you throughout your renovation project. As a result of our partnership, we are offering everybody £25 off of your quote with us. So if you're running through your quote on our website, just make sure you put the discount code of HomeNotes25 when you're asked for a code. Or if you're speaking to one of our team over the phone, just mention it to them and they can log it all for you. Because you can run through a quote over the phone with us if you'd prefer to sort of talk about it. And I think we have come to the end.
Amazing. That was brilliant. Sorry, I was going to chip in, but actually I was just intently listening because I just wanted to hear what you were going to say. We have had a few questions while you've been talking, and I'll pull them up. I think some of them you've already kind of answered just through the talk, but I'll read these out because people on the replay won't be able to see them. So we'll say, Jason has said, assume you want the site secure to allow for theft cover. How secure do you require the site to be? Are there examples? Is it metal fencing, cameras, etc.? What do you need?
Yeah, I mean, we get asked this a lot. So with us in particular, we don't define what secure is, but what we would say is, if you've got a property that's got no windows and doors, and you're keeping items inside, then we would probably expect those to be boarded up. You need to sort of show how you're keeping it secure. So if you've got fences out the front, again, yeah, lock the site up, or maybe put like a padlock around when it's no one's on site. Basically, what the insurer just want to avoid is someone can easily just walk in, go through like a door or a gap or whatever, pick up something and just walk straight off site. If they then have to climb over fences, or maybe even have to run something down with a car or a van or whatever, then that's going to an extreme which isn't easily accessible. So I think it's just all about, although we don't define it, just showing that you're making it secure. So like I say, gates or fences, lock those up at the end of the day. Any gaps in the property, make sure they're boarded up, and then you can't really go wrong.
Great. That's really helpful. Thank you. Louise, I think you have kind of answered this one, but I'll just make sure. How do you calculate the price and length of renovation insurance? Some projects might be 3 months, 12 months plus, for example. You kind of said this in that you take out a longer, as longer policies you think you're going to need, and maybe a little bit more, and then you can claim. I thought that was amazing. You can claim back the months that you've spent afterwards.
Yeah, so that's one of our kind of selling points, because we want to encourage someone to make sure they are adequately insured from day one. So that's why we've got that in there, to make sure people get their money back if they haven't used a section of their policy. The way that our quotes are all calculated, it's all sum insured driven. So if you've got really low sums insured, you're obviously going to be looking at a lower end premium. It's all rated based on the existing building, how much the rebuild of that is, and how much you're spending on the works. And then it's contract specific, so we can do anything ranging between a 3-month policy and a 3-year policy. So 17 months, 18 months, whatever you need, we can calculate it, and it's all done on a pro rata basis.
I think just on that as well with the calculation, I know Brooke says it's all sum insured driven, but if you were to say have a 3-month policy, 2 3-month policies, and they were both exactly the same sums insured, but then one had like green roofs, one had different elements of construction, that's also going to impact things. So although it is very heavily sum insured driven, there's also other factors to consider. So don't expect everyone's premiums to be exactly the same for the same sums insured, basically.
And then as well, just to so our minimum premium starts from £109 on our 2 lower levels of cover. Oh, have I just come on to the next
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, and you're
timing.
answering already. Go on.
Yeah, so our 2 lower levels of cover, they start from £109, and then our highest level of cover, Premier Plus, that starts from £529. So they're the minimum premiums, but generally we can do a slightly longer policy term, or if you fall within that minimum, if that makes sense.
Okay,
But I think
that's
also
a monthly price.
well, that'd be depending on how long you've gone for. So if you was let's say,
So
for
like
instance,
you're spending
hypothetically, if it was a 6-month policy and that was the insurer's minimum premium, that would be for the 6-month period, and then it'd be pro rata on extension. But I think, it's just, worth mentioning though that home insurance and renovation insurance don't compare the two when it comes to pricing, because there's also the factor when you're doing a lot of insurance is based on risk of something going wrong. So with renovation, obviously there's works ongoing at the property. The risk of something going on is probably a lot higher than if you've got 2 people just, having a night in, and watching a bit of TV. So don't compare the two. It's also the cover that you get as well. So as we explained, although home insurers may agree to continue cover because it's within their limits, they're probably not giving you the right cover. They're probably heavily restricting it. They're probably not going to give you cover for the materials. Your public liability cover might not be suitable whilst you're having work. So although they can seem more expensive, it's not comparable to a home insurance policy, basically.
Okay, I think that comes to you're preempting all the questions.
Oh, right, okay.
So Louise was asking, also, I think my current insurer offers an add-on, a premium for renovation insurers. Would it not be easier, cleaner to go with one insurer rather than 2 policies?
I mean, if they do it, then by all means, go with them.
Checking what's
Yeah,
covered, isn't
but
it? So
you've
I
got
guess you need to kind of compare what is going to be included in each policy and see whether that suits what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I would definitely ask them what cover they'll have, what restrictions are in place, what exclusions apply. I think the main ones that we say is make sure that you've got enough level of a high enough level of cover for your building. You've got cover for the work and the materials that you're buying in, and public liability cover. So all policies, I'd say most or all buildings policies will come with public liability cover. So that's obviously to protect you. I mean, in the example of a renovation policy, it's to protect you should someone come on site and injure themselves, or you're responsible for damage to third-party property. Now, if you've got public liability cover in place on a home insurance policy, just make sure that is in place and effective when you're having work done. Because if it's not, obviously, if it's a very severe accident or injury to someone, you could be on for a considerable amount of money to pay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we've got one more question here from Lydia. You said about cancelling the current insurance in order to move to the renovation insurance. Do you then expect the homeowner to restart the previous policy? Do people organise a break or seek a new level of full cover anyway because the property has changed or increased?
So with this, usually as soon as the works are complete, then yes, you would then go on to arrange a home insurance policy again. If you've kept your contents insured with your current home insurance provider, then it is quite simple to add your buildings cover back on. You might want to consider adjusting your sums insured, your building sum insured now that the works are finished. So sometimes if you've spent sort of 50, 60,000 pound doing your property up, that might have increased the rebuild. So you might need to review that when you do arrange your home insurance. As soon as your works are complete, though, our team does have that conversation with you, because I'm not sure if we mentioned this at the beginning, but we are part of Howden Insurance Brokers. So as well as having the specialist renovation scheme, we can help you with your home insurance as well. And all of our colleagues insurer panel, they're all familiar with what we do on renovation, and they can sort of guide you through your new home insurance policy once your works are finished.
Great. I'm going to slip in with just the final question, if that's okay, which I don't think is an easy one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So your contractor has insurance for their side of the project. You have insurance for your existing building and the stuff you've bought and your house. And a joint names policy, does that cover both of those insurances? Does it cover the contractor's insurance and your insurance all in one policy?
So yeah, so with that, the likelihood if there is a joint names policy request, it's probably very possible that your contractor doesn't have an all risk policy in place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't speak about the ins and outs of a JCT because there's a lot of involvement that goes with it. Of actually, you get like someone that operates that JCT for you, and you decide the decisions with them and the various sort of clauses that apply in bits and pieces. But in terms of insurance, if you see in joint names coverage, it's probably because your contractor doesn't have it. So what that will then do is there will be cover for the building and cover for the work in both your name or the client's name, as we
Mm-hmm.
see him, and then the contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So what that then does is it gives more control for the person who's having the work done to their property, because I think I mentioned earlier, obviously, about if a contractor doesn't renew their insurances,
Yeah.
that gives you greater control. You know what's going on with your insurances, you can then renew it. But then the only thing it doesn't cover is the contractor's liability. So if they were then negligent for any injury or damage to a third party, they still need their own public liability cover. But the main reason for having a joint names policy is to make sure all the works, all the buildings, all in the one place.
Yeah, because I think we've had a situation where we wanted our client to claim through the contractor's insurance, but then we were totally reliant on the contractor to arrange that, and obviously that's a right faff. So like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's like it's not really in their interest to like get on and then all the you're already in a really stressful place. So it's really nice to have the thought that you have visibility or you have an ability to contact the insurer yourself and ask what the situation is
Yeah.
and do it that way. Is that right? Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, and also I think when it comes to like the works insurance, because it's for most people, it's going to be a one-time thing. You're going to be doing a massive project to your own home. It's good to get as much cover as you possibly can, because once that's done, you've ensured you've had adequate protection. You're not going to be having this cover forever, so you're not going to be duplicating it the whole time. But like I say, even if your contractor has works cover and you have works cover, there's no sort of real duplication there because it's protecting both your financial interests. So if you've got purchased materials and they've purchased materials, it's for whatever part of that's damaged, and then you can ensure then there's no sort of grey areas.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Okay, I think that's everything. If no one else has any more questions, I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much for being with us today and
Yeah,
being
no, thank you guys.
super on it in terms of letting us all know everything there is to know about insurance. And I'm assuming that people can contact you and, obviously get information about their own specific circumstances. And I think you also said, obviously, we always recommend people have a proper building contract for their works. And what's also great about building contracts is that they tell you the amount of policy or the types of policy that should be that you should have. So I think you'd said that you can show you the contract to make sure that
so
the contract has got
especially
the right insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. So especially with JCTs, if I would always say send that to your insurance broker or send that to us, for example. We can have a look through, make sure that the policy that you arrange is complying with all those points in there. But yeah, I mean, if you want to come to our website or give us a call, I mean, one of the team can help. But if you did want to speak to me, for example, then, you know, feel free to ask for me, feel free to ask for Brooke. We can have a chat. But yeah, we're more than happy to help.
Excellent. That's really great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you for having us.
Cheers, guys.
yeah, thanks for using your lunch to chat to us.
Take
Bye,
care. Bye.
everybody.